There's real math, and then there's marketer's math. Let's get into it. This isn't going to be some big rant. I bet you're glad. We're just going to talk about the numbers and how to look at it with a little bit more critical eye because frankly, there's a lot of sleight of hand type marketing out there, and it's always been there in one form or another. But we just kind of want to go over some examples and what to avoid. Before we do get started, though, please subscribe if you like this kind of stuff, and I'll put more of it out there. All right, let's get going. So, the first thing is that this is what we call the false urgency math that's out there. And those are things that are like, for example, get it now for $27. Its regular price is $67, but they don't advertise the regular price anywhere. In other words, it's not on their website. It's not anywhere. It's just, you just see that in the sales letter. Actually, and I don't quote me on this, but I believe that's an FTC violation to begin with. Nevertheless, it's just not a good thing to put out there. Now, it might be, you might put $67 value. I could go with that. But if you put down today's price, you don't want to show that you're selling it for another price elsewhere or that you normally have it for another price elsewhere. That's just not a good practice. Another thing that happens a lot is I only have 100 spots left. So you're doing a webinar or even your coaching program or whatever, and I only have 5 spots left. That's okay if it's true. If it's not true, obviously it's not something you really want to lean into because it's not really that helpful. The urgency of it doesn't work as well as most people think it does. But so it's all in positioning how you say it. If you have 100 spots, cut it off at 100. It's that simple. Another thing that I see a lot has to do with automated webinars, showing people quote live in the room when they're not in the room and that kind of thing, and it's all automated. So that seems a little over the line. Now it could be people who attended previously. I get that, but if they're made up names, that doesn't work. And I see that a lot out there. And the fact is, if your offer needs that stuff to sell your offer, then your offer stinks. It's just that simple. So just don't do it, is what I'm going to suggest. The next thing is revenue without expenses. Man, gosh, I see this all the time. So we made $100,000 in 30 days. There's nothing wrong with saying that. There's nothing wrong at all. If that's accurate and that's what happened, great, that's fine. But what you want to think about critically though is, well, what were their, did they spend $70,000 on ads and then another $20,000 in administrative stuff? So really they spent $90,000 to make $100,000. That's, you just have to be careful with that. And people tend to lean into that a lot about how much revenue they generated. I see that a lot in a lot of different places, but they don't really talk about how much they had to spend to generate that revenue. So be very careful when you see that out there. And you just want to ask, what did it cost to make that, to generate that revenue? The next thing is return on ad spend without context. And what I mean by that is I will see sometimes where people say, we got a 10x return or whatever, but what they don't tell you is they got that on a small scale, not a large scale. In other words, they spent $100 and they made 1,000. They didn't spend 100,000 to make 1,000,000. If that makes sense. It might work in one area, but it doesn't work in another. And so that's a very fine line. You have to be very careful of that when people are saying those things to you. 10x of what they spend over what was the time frame. What was really being accomplished there and what was the time frame on it. It's really what it comes down to. And again, there's not anything wrong with saying it that way. It's just as somebody on the outside looking in, you want to just be critical of that and make sure that you understand the context of it. And the reason, by the way, the reason I'm bringing all this stuff up is because when you're selling your own stuff, you want to be aware of it. You want to have urgency, but you just want to make sure you stay within the lines. I'm not saying that you're not. I'm just saying just because somebody else isn't staying in the lines doesn't mean that you're not going to. Okay, here's something else I've been seeing a lot of lately is the average order value. So people say their average order value is $80 or $100 or $200 or whatever it is. And that sounds great. Great. $80, 100 sales, that's $8,000. Great. Okay. But they're not including the acquisition cost. So similar to what I was talking about earlier, if you don't know what it costs to acquire a customer, the fact that their average order value is $80 really is meaningless. Like it doesn't really mean much. If it costs them $120 to get the customer, Okay, then they're $40 in the hole every time they get an order. So now, and by the way, that may not be a bad thing, right? Sometimes it's okay to go negative, which that's a whole other video, but to go negative to get the initial order in or to get the initial person in. We do that all the time, right? With lead magnets and stuff where you're paying $5 a lead or $10 a lead or whatever it is. So we do that all the time, but when somebody puts out their average order value, you just have to be cautious of exactly what that means and what their goal is with their sales to begin with. Let's just talk real quick about lifetime value. I've seen things where people say, well, we spent our offer's $27 and we made 100,000. Okay, great. How many of those did you had to sell and what was the time frame? Was it in a week, a month, a year, 5 years? What is it? Without knowing that, having that perspective, it doesn't really matter that they have an offer at 27 that made 100,000. Again, you could be breaking even for all we know. So just be careful when you see that stuff. The next thing is this whole thing about what I call the ad spend shell game. And what I mean is you'll see people say, I've managed millions or spent millions in ads. Okay, but what does that really mean? Does that mean millions of your own money or millions of somebody else? And exactly what were the results? It's not really about how much you spent because spending isn't the same as profiting, right? They could have broke even the whole time for all we know or lost money. Just saying that doesn't inherently mean that something good came out of it. But big numbers tend to get attention, so people use that. And they usually, when I look into it, and I just happen to know a lot of people, it's just because I've been doing this forever. Usually, when I look into it, it's not that it's completely false, and it's usually when people put that out there, they've made money on some level, but it's they're not really making the amounts that you think that they're making when they throw out numbers about how much they spent in ads. Now, a good way to look at it or to do it is using real math. If that's part of what you need to sell. Now, let me just say this. If you're a health and wellness coach, you just want to equate that in the same way, but I'm just talking about financially at the moment. All right. So the last things is that, again, most people aren't intentionally being disingenuous. That's not really what's going on out there for the most part. Most of the people that I'll run into are running legitimate businesses and they're trying to promote whatever it is that they have, just like everybody else. But on our end as a buyer, or if somebody's coming to me and they're looking to hire us, we just want to make sure that we're not putting out fake urgency, but we are putting out urgency, by the way. You do need to have urgency at every point in your marketing, but it needs to be real urgency, not fake urgency based on some kind of shady math game. And by the way, not all that stuff that I said earlier was necessarily shady. Like I was talking about before with the revenue. If you said you made 100,000 in revenue, that's good. That's good. Nobody's saying you need to tell them everything about everything. I'm just saying if you're looking at it from the outside looking in, you want to know more than that. Hopefully that makes sense. So it's the whole thing about integrity. And I know that if you're even watching or you've watched this far, you have some level of integrity with what you're doing. I get that. So I appreciate that. It's just, I don't think we talk about it enough in marketing about how important integrity is. And I just kind of wanted to bring it up and make sure we're all on the same page. All right, just to kind of wrap this all up, when you're evaluating somebody in their marketing, and I don't care who it is, right? That you could be evaluating a health and fitness coach that doesn't have anything to do with money, right? They're just putting out numbers, and you just want to think of those with a critical eye. The other thing is when you're looking at somebody else's marketing, you don't know what's really going on there. And so this happens all the time. Clients will say, "Oh, such and such is running all these ads and that, blah blah blah." Which is great, but do you know what's really working and what's not working? And if they don't, then it doesn't really mean much. You can get inspiration from it, but not necessarily base your whole plan on it. One of the things I tend to do, just because I'm crazy like this, is that if I see ads that I like or in a competitor or a client's competitor or something, I'll screenshot it and then I'll put a note in to check again in on it in 30 days. 9 times out of 10, that ad's not running anymore. And it just means the ad wasn't effective or the offer wasn't effective. We don't really know what happened, but they usually don't last. That's all I'm trying to say. So the key to it is you want to build trust. Okay, so if you're in the health and fitness industry and you say you're going to have 100 spots available in this blah, 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 then do that. If you're going to have a countdown timer and you say offer expires such and such, then that's what it should do. It should expire and such. Okay. If you like stuff like this, then you'll probably want to subscribe to my Brutal Truth Marketing Digest. It's a once a week newsletter and it gets straight to the point and tells you exactly like it is when it comes to the world of marketing. So check that out. It's in the link below somewhere. I'm sure you can find it. And don't forget to subscribe. All right. I'll catch y'all on the next episode.